At around 11 p.m. on the night of August the 21st, 1955, a group of people burst into the police station at Hopkinsville, Kentucky. They were upset and in a state of panic, and in what could have been an opening to a sci-fi horror movie, said to the officer on duty, "We need help. We've been fighting them for nearly 4 hours." Fighting what? Or whom? Apparently they were little silver men, or green as the media portrayed them, yucking up the common description given in pulp sci-fi and cinema. The Kelly Hopkinsville case is one of ufology's most divisive cases. To some it's absolute proof of alien visitation, to others a hoax or even an overreaction to an owl attack on the farm whilst being under the influence of alcohol. But before we make any conclusions of our own, let's go back to the beginning, and please like and subscribe to this channel. One small click for you is a giant leap for me and the channel itself. As most UFO alien encounters go, everything started out innocently enough. Billy Ray Taylor of Pennsylvania was visiting his friend Elmer Lucky Sutton at his farmhouse near the tiny town of Kelly in Kentucky. In the evening, Taylor went outside to fetch some water from the well when an object streaking through the sky caught his attention. He later said that the object was real bright and silvery with an exhaust that was all the colours of the rainbow. He noticed the object came down somewhere beyond the farmhouse. There was no explosion, just a hissing noise as it came down. Panicking, he ran into the house and told everyone inside that he had just seen a UFO. Everyone just laughed at him, not taking him seriously at all, until the dog began barking. It was barking because someone, or something, was approaching the house. This prompted Lucky to go out with Taylor to check the area at the well. There was nothing there, so they returned to the house. On the way back, they saw a glowing figure, holding its hands above its head and walking out of the darkened woods. On seeing this, both men ran back to the house and began barricading the doors. What allegedly happened next has been a bone of contention for nigh on 66 years. The witnesses all described the creatures as having oversized heads with long arms that ended in talons that nearly touched the ground. They all seemed to glow and shimmer. Their bodies seemed to be metallic silver and their eyes gave off a yellowish light. There were about 12 of them. Worse still, they were now outside the house. May I just add that we're not talking a bricks and mortar house, but instead an old wooden homestead type of house, which wouldn't have even given fantastic protection against the earthly elements, let alone an extraterrestrial siege. Taylor and Lucky grabbed guns and loaded them, ready to protect themselves and their families. One of the creatures put its face up to the window, and the men inside started shooting. For the next few hours, in what seemed like a bizarre cat and mouse game, the creatures kept getting close up to the ground and then moving away. When they were shot at, the witnesses reported that it sounded like you were shooting at a sheet of metal or a bucket, and when they were hit they also seemed to flip backwards and float away, sometimes into the trees. At one point, when it appeared things were quietening down, Taylor stepped outside. Unbeknownst to him, there was a creature on the roof that reached down and touched his hair. Eventually the activity ceased and several of the witnesses got into a car and went to the Hopkinsville police station to get help. Police Chief Russell Greenwell said the people who shown up were genuinely terrified. One man had a pulse rate of 140 beats per minute. He also added that these are not the kind of people who would normally ask the police to help. They would much rather use their guns. Greenwell and 3 other officers went out to the Sutton farmhouse to see what had happened, but couldn't find any evidence of little men, silver, green or otherwise, but saw plenty of evidence of a gunfight with numerous bullet holes in the windows and walls. Once happy there was nothing to be seen, the police left the farm around 2:15 a.m, and not long after, the creatures returned, playing Peeping Tom at the window, scratching the wooden walls and scurrying up and onto the roof. Suffice to say, the family didn't sleep much. That's a simplified, shorter version of the more well-known story of the case. But now, let's delve a little deeper. The encounter took place about 7.5 miles north of Hopkinsville in Kentucky, USA, in the small community of Kelly. 50-year-old Glennie Langford lived in the simplest of farmhouses that the nearest neighbours were about 1/4 of a mile away. With her lived one of her sons from her first marriage, J.C. Sutton, and his wife, Aileen. Aileen's children from her second marriage lived with them also, Lonnie, Charlton and Mary. J.C. ran the farm for his mother, and on the evening of the encounter Mrs. Langford had guests staying overnight. Elmer, Lucky Sutton, the eldest son from her first marriage, and his wife Vera, Lucky's friend Billy Ray Taylor and his wife June, Aileen's brother, O.P. Baker, was also staying that night, making a total of 11 people under the Langford roof. And as I said, it was a simple farmhouse. No TV, no phone, no radio, no water. And it was because of the lack of running water that Billy Ray Taylor went outside and first saw the object. Contrary to popular belief, he didn't just see the object zip across the sky. In fact, it passed close by, silently, about 40 feet from the ground, flying in from the south where it stopped over a neighbour's field to the north and silently settled down in a gully about 300 feet from the Langford home. Taylor ran back inside to tell them what he'd saw, but no one believed him, as he often told tall tales just to get a rise out of people. Under less than an hour after Taylor's sighting, the family dog began barking, madly. So letting the dog go out before them, Billy Ray and Lucky Sutton went out to investigate. Instead of heading off towards whatever was disturbing the dog hid underneath the house with its tail between its legs. It was at this point that the men saw something glowing emerging from the nearby darkened field. And as it approached and got nearer, they could make out that it was about 3.5 to 4 feet tall, with a muscular body, spindly legs with no knees, a large head, big floppy ears, long arms, and taloned hands that almost touched the ground. Eyes that pointed out at 45 degrees from the centre of its head, silver in colour, with a strange glow in the darkness. And as it got closer, it raised its arms skywards. Grabbing their guns, the men moved inside the house, and when the creature was about 20 feet away, they shot it. The creature, when hit, somersaulted backwards, landing on all fours and ran into the surrounding bushes. Lucky handed his gun over to his brother JC and grabbed a 12-bore shotgun for himself. JC and Billy Ray spotted a creature at the window and both started shooting at it, and again the creature flipped backwards and ran off. It really did now seem to be like a siege. Billy Ray went outside to see if he had killed the creature. A taloned hand slinked down from the roof above and touched Billy Ray's hair. JC's wife Aileen pulled him back inside whilst Lucky darted out and shot the creature on the roof. Billy Ray then shot a creature in a nearby tree. It fell out of the tree, but instead of falling, it slowly floated down, unscathed. So both Billy Ray and Lucky shot it again, and it ran off into the bushes. The men estimated there were a number of these creatures, although it appeared that never more than 2 were seen at the same time. Lucky shot one of these creatures at point-blank range, saying it was like shooting into a metal bucket. Each and every time one was hit, the result was almost exactly the same, a backflip, and then it would scurry off. It was at this point that the men realised that these things couldn't be killed, so they went back indoors, firing the occasional shot at anything that got too near a window or a door. For the next 3 hours the creatures ran riot outside, peering through the windows. The witnesses noticed though that the creatures attempted to approach the house under cover of darkness and avoided the glow of the yard lights. They also appeared to glow more once shot, or even if you shouted at them. At around 11 PM it appeared to quieten down, but the group of people were frightened and hysterical, and they all got into the 2 vehicles that were outside and fled the scene to the police station in Hopkinsville, which was only a few miles away. The officers on duty saw that the group were in a state of shock. They then called the Chief of Police, Russell Greenwell, who in turn notified the Kentucky State Police. All the witnesses, apart from June Taylor, who was too frightened, Greenwell and 2 state troopers, one of which saw strange objects in the sky which appeared to be travelling in the direction of the top-secret Armed Forces Special Weapons Project Site C at Clarksville. Now this was a national stockpile site for nuclear weapons. Whether that's a coincidence or not, I don't know. Anyway, they drove back to the farmhouse where the incident had taken place. The Christian County Sheriff's Office sent a deputy sheriff and also a photographer, who also took his wife along as well. Also arriving on scene were a reporter from Madisonville, 2 locals and 4 military policemen from Fort Campbell. On reaching the farmhouse, the witnesses stayed outside whilst everyone else looked in the farmhouse, yard and surrounding areas. There were visible evidence that some sort of firefight had happened, but no sighting of any creatures or bodies. They did find a glowing patch of grass, but believed it to be a form of fungus called foxfire. Greenwell had had a UFO sighting himself back in 1952, so he did believe that the witnesses had seen and experienced something strange, but his investigations didn't bring forth of any proof of an alien visitation. Around 2 AM the police and other investigators were satisfied there was no further sign of anything unusual, and they all left the site to allow the witnesses to try and sleep. Around 2:30am, Glennie Langford was laying on a bed when she noticed a glow outside. Looking towards the window, she saw one of the creatures with its face and talons pressed against the screen. She shouted Lucky, who came in with his gun, and despite Glennie asking him to leave the creature alone, he shot at it anyway. For the next 2 hours, the creatures kept looking into the house, never entering or showing any hostility, and of course, more shots were fired. Around 5am, they eventually disappeared. Later that morning, the investigators returned to do a more thorough search. It was at this time that the media got hold of the story. It became big news. Local radio station WHOP in Hopkinsville, and it's still around today, was the first to report the story. Engineer and announcer Bud Lewis arrived with the station's owner's son, and after speaking to Glennie Langford and the Sutton women, drew sketches of the creatures based on their descriptions. Media folk from Kentucky, Tennessee and Indiana converged on the area over the next few days. Can I just add that although the Public Information Office denies there was actually any official investigation, it does appear that after WHOP's initial broadcast of the story, an officer from Fort Campbell Air Force Base arrived on scene. Police Chief Russell Greenwell claimed that 2 officials from Commercial Air Force Stendyford also shown up. The witnesses and neighbours declined interviews, although some neighbours did attest to hearing gunshots and seeing lights from the farm during the night. Of course, the incident brought sightseers, so many that Glennie Langford had to call the state police to move them on, and even made a plea in the local paper, the Kentucky New Era, pleading for people to stay away. She never did another interview after the initial WHOP interview. The investigation was fruitless. No footprints were found of the creatures, but that could have been because it had been so warm the ground was baked, because even the investigators who were walking around left no footprints behind. No bullet cases collected from inside the house or yard. 2 days later, after the incident, the United States Official UFO Investigation Group announced that there was no truth in the story, no Air Force report, or even an official investigation. As ever with the media, the reporting was both hostile and inaccurate. They called the creatures little men, said there was around 15 of them, and most saddening that despite the creature showing no hostility, the media branded the incident as an invasion. Although the witnesses described the creatures as silvery, the newspapers went with the headlines of little green men. As ever, with any case, we have to look at all possible explanations, some feasible, others not so. With your usual UFO sightings, they're usually explained away as misidentified weather phenomenon, or planets, stars, weather balloons or aircraft. The Kelly Hopkinsville case isn't that easy to dismiss with the usual wheeled out explanations. One of the most purported explanations is that the family saw great horned owls. These owls are aggressive, eyes that appear to glow, feathered tufts that look like ears, can fly, so that would explain the floating, and are around 2 feet in height. Some boxes may be ticked there, but I doubt an owl can just run off after being hit point blank by a shotgun, or have metallic feathers that gave off a sound when shot at. Another investigation was that the family were drunk and things got out of hand. Firstly, the police investigation concluded that no alcohol was involved, and apparently it was quite common knowledge that Glennie Langford wouldn't allow cursing on her land, let alone alcohol. Was it a hoax? It's fair to say that Billy Ray Taylor was the only one of the investigators found to be an unreliable witness. He often embellished or changed his story where everyone else's story never changed. A few days after the incident, a sign went up on the farm's driveway stating an admission fee and extra fees for interviews or photographs, and the media were quick to jump on this and paint the entire family as money-grabbing hoaxers, where actually, under investigation, it was again Billy Ray Taylor who in fact made a lowly few dollars from any of this. If this was a hoax to become rich and famous, then it was a poorly executed hoax. Still, we have to look at the lack of evidence. I mentioned earlier there were no footprints, but again the soil had been baked hard. Yet even without the hard evidence, the family shown clear signs of terror, shock and fear. Billy Ray Taylor's pulse rate was 140 beats per minute, and there was no sign of drug or alcohol being taken. Glennie Langford sold the farm within a few months of the incident. And in all the years that passed, even up to their deathbeds, stories never changed, nor did they ever profit from this incident. Those still alive refused to talk about it anymore. Lucky's daughter Geraldine talks for them and has released the books Alien Legacy in 2007, The Kelly Green Men, Alien Legacy Revisited in 2015, and speaks at the Kelly Little Green Men Festival every year. Whatever the explanation, the incident at Kelly has left its mark on our culture. Spielberg's E.T. supposedly drew heavily on the Kelly case, and it was an inspiration for Critters, Gremlins, Signs, and a movie due to start filming later this year called The Visitants, which is supposed to be about the encounter at Kelly, and it's being filmed at the scene. Ufologists should be thankful to this case as it brought entity encounters out to the open. People had mentioned them long before the famous Roswell case of 1947, but now the media, and to some extent the US Air Force, were now acknowledging the reports even though they dismissed them. A massive wave of entity reports and sightings was being reported across Western Europe in 1954, but that's a subject that we'll cover in another episode. I think that about wraps it up for the Kelly case. As ever, I hope it's piqued your interest enough that you may have a look at it yourself. Have a look on the internet, get some books, have a read of it, and draw your own conclusions. For me, it's another classic case that intrigued me as a kid when I first heard about it, and still intrigues me to this day. Alongside the Flatwoods Monster case, that I also recently covered here on the Unconventional Ufologist, the Kelly case propelled me into studying, researching and investigating the UFO phenomena. So doing documentaries like this is a labour of love. I do hope that you've enjoyed this case and that you'll join me again on the Unconventional Ufologist with another classic case or informative discussion. See you soon. Take care.